So I'll record right now. Let me do a screen test share real quick. If I do this, you guys can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm gonna not stop doing that then so they can see you. And cool, I'll just let you guys let people in whenever you feel appropriate. And Shannon, you can do your
Go
thing.
ahead. Yeah, so we're letting people in now, Paul, okay?
Here they all come.
Here they come. Everybody's on the way.
I remember the days of live presentations when you could see everybody's smiles or frowns when a joke did or didn't
I
land.
know. I prefer that, but it just, there's something about connecting in a room.
Yeah.
But I also know that we have a lot more turnout.
Yeah, it's a lot easier. And I just dilute myself into thinking everything I say is super hilarious or super brilliant. And so I picture all the black screens as like smiles and thumbs up.
Yeah. And actually in our parent night, we had a lot of people actually showing their faces, which was so nice.
Oh, that's great.
I know, it was nice, I know. But I don't blame it after a long day of work. If you want to hide, you can hide.
For sure. Yeah. This is not some a passive aggressive way of saying everybody should show their faces or anything. You guys can totally keep your screens off if you want.
We understand.
Okay.
Are we good? We can start it? Okay. So I can just start speaking. Ready to go? Everybody's in? Okay.
Go for it, Chan.
Okay. Hi, everybody. We may have seen each other before through the same computer screen. I'm Shannon Rodriguez. I'm one of the college counselors here at Redondo High School. And our team here, Ms. Bartici, Ms. Clausen, and I wanted to welcome you to this event, if you will, tonight. We are hosting our very special friend to Redondo, Mr. Paul Jury, who has been working with kids at Redondo for many years. And he is going to be presenting some information tonight on the SAT, ACT, nothing on the new SAT probably, right, Paul? Because it doesn't.
No, that won't apply to juniors, so we'll say.
No, not yet, not yet. And some really good information on your students' college story, which has become a significant part of this evaluation process for many of the private colleges and out-of-state public universities. So with that being said, Paul Jury, thank you for being with us tonight, and I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Marion. Thank you, Ryan, so much for having me here. I'm going to share my screen with you all, so hopefully we can see that. Do you guys have my presentation up there on the screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so I think we're good technically. I want to welcome you guys. Thank you so much for joining us this blustery Thursday evening. Guys, I am Paul Jury. As they mentioned, my last name is only at the bottom of these things, but it is just like in the court. Feel free to make fun of it if you like. Some suggestions include injury, forgery, grand jury, perjury, or if I ever went to England and got knighted, I would be surgery. Apologies for everybody who's had to hear that joke before. But guys, I run PJ Test Prep. We're a boutique SAT, ACT prep, and academic tutoring company. Also do a ton of essay advising, starting up pretty soon. And I today want to talk to you guys about kind of where things are at with college admissions and ideally some, oh, this is the wrong flyer. No wonder my last name's not it. Here we go. That's a better flyer. Through hacking your way through both the bramble bushes of this whole process and hopefully some tips on how you guys can optimize your chances on all this. Organizationally, I don't have a nice table of contents here, but our structure will be pretty simple. I'm going to first try to reassure you guys about this whole process, make everybody relax a little bit. We'll talk a bit about the SAT, ACT. I have some tips for you guys. At the end, I'll give some information about future presentations where like I'll go much more into depth on SAT, ACT, and much more into depth on essay stuff in case you want to hear any more of that later. But I'm hoping to cram a bunch of good information and tips into you guys here today as well. And that'll be the third portion, is discussing, as Shannon says, the essays, which definitely are more important than ever as colleges strive to really get to know who who you are as a person beyond just the numbers that you represent on the page. So let's jump right in, guys. I got a whole bunch of stuff I want to talk about, so let's smash into it. The first thing I want to take you guys through and talk to you about here, and all of this will be on the handout, which make it sent out to you guys. I'm going to post it on our website, pjtestprep.com. It'll be up here at the top, probably by the end of tonight or tomorrow, in case you want to download the handout. And if anybody misses any part of this presentation and wants to see it, I'll post that video online as well. But first, I want to hopefully rest your anxieties about this a little bit in talking about where the college pictures is at these days versus where it seems like it's at. So I use these statistics a little, and yes, there's an asterisk, and yes, some of these numbers are from pre-pandemic, although I'll show you in a minute, I was researching some of this thing, and although maybe it's gotten a little worse at a few places, it's still kind of around this realm. But there's like 1,400 four-year colleges and universities in the country here. And at last check, there's 17 of them that admitted fewer than 10% of their applicants. Obviously, you get schools, you know, with big names, Harvard, Stanford, Ivy League stuff, places like that. There was also only 29 that admitted between 10 and 20%, which, you know, of course, here are 3 of the schools that you guys are all applying to right there as well. We'll talk more about why California is particularly nasty as well in terms of admission sometimes. But these extremely competitive schools only make up 3.4% of all schools and 4.1% of total student enrollment. And again, these are numbers from a year or two ago, but like I just, you know, was going online and looking up some of these things. You know, UCLA's acceptance rate is, you know, 14.3%, which is very, very competitive, but it hasn't dropped down to 2% anything. It might be a little lower with certain schools or depending on where you Google exactly. But there's also so many schools that, you know, the acceptance rates are way, way higher. There are, in fact, over 700, over half of these schools admitted 2/3 of their applicants. And there's schools on here that you know. I mean, these are not schools that like nobody's ever heard of. These are schools that employers are still clamoring after. They're just not insanely hard to get into. In fact, I was looking at this. This was prior to the devastating loss of St. Peter's. But if any of you guys are basketball fans, here are the 8 teams that were left in the Elite 8. And I mean, Kansas is the last #1 seed. You can get into Kansas. You can get into Arkansas. You can go to St. Peter's. I mean, anybody who admitted themselves there a couple years ago is having a great time right now. Some of these schools, Miami's gotten more competitive. Florida's a little crazy. Villanova and UNC are pretty solid schools. And then Duke, well, you know, Duke's are pretty good schools, so tough to get in there. But this is like a little bit of a spectrum of just how many places there are out there. So as it says here, guys, if you're here on a Thursday night in a presentation about like hacking college admissions, you are going to college if you want. I mean, the most successful guy at my 5-year high school reunion had not gone to college, had just taken a position at Best Buy and was now a regional manager making like $100K a year as a 22-year-old and was buying the rest of his drinks. There's many paths to success outside of that, but it's not why you guys are here. In any case, there are lots of different opportunities here. Don't be afraid to look outside of California. There are 49 other states. I'm from Minnesota, so of course I'm biased, but remember, colleges are always going to be more impressive to the people who live right near them. So, you know, think of where you might live after college. Like there might be a couple times in this presentation where it sounds like I'm ripping on UCs, but I'm definitely not. I don't have to tell you guys how great the UCs are. But a guy from my high school in Minneapolis went to UCLA, and everybody was like, why don't you go to a good school like the U of M or St. Olaf? By the way, I know St. Olaf sounds like a made-up snow college from the movie Frozen, but it is a real school, very highly ranked liberal arts college. And I know UCLA carries clout everywhere, but like if you go to Ohio, people there definitely think Ohio State is a better school than UC Santa Barbara. They might be wrong, but you know there are employers there. So consider and do remember the UCs and CSUs are, you know, probably arguably, maybe not even arguably, the best public system in the country. They have gotten extra competitive. I know that. There's 4 reasons why that's true. California is a big state. I don't know if you guys just know how big, but California has more people in it than Canada does. 1 in 8 Americans lives in California, and they're all fighting over an amazing public college system. So of course, that just makes things more competitive. It's cheap. UCLA in-state tuition's like $13,000 this year. And if you're ever curious about these, this stuff is all super Googleable. In-state tuition. Yeah, it looks like it's still 43 if you're coming from out of state. No wonder my friends made fun of that guy. Why don't you go to a different state to pay 43? Anyway, 13K is great. I mean, that is very good, but don't overlook financial aid. Like, remember that if you really can only afford $13,000 a year and a school's financial aid office agrees with you, then every school in the country is the same price as a UC. So people sometimes look at the price tags and they're like, oh, Stanford's 56, but like, unless you're making $1 million, like you're probably not going to pay all of that. So do keep your eyes elsewhere as well. The other factor, well, there's 2 other factors. One other thing that's contributing to UC's sort of arms race of competitiveness is the GPA only thing right now with no SAT and ACT. The UCs have kind of become like a mad pileup of every 4.0 GPA in the state. So, if your GPA has a ding in it and you were hoping to use your SAT, ACT score to boost you up, that's not the greatest news for you at the UCs. But guess where they are still looking at test scores and will let you take that bump? Basically every other school in the country. You're never sure during the pandemic, things are always changing. But yesterday I was curious, so I Googled like test blind universities, and there was about like 45 of them, like half of which were UCs. And so there's 1,350 other schools that probably will at least look at your test scores. There's a lot of test optional schools still, but that's even better news for SAT, ACT. You can use it if it helps you, as I'll talk about in that section of the presentation. And the 4th reason that the UCs are so competitive is because, well, let's check. It's 32 degrees right now in Minneapolis. Oh, it's increased 1 degree. So, California is an awesome state. And of course, everybody wants to come to school here. That's why I moved. But there are other states. The weather's nice in Arizona and Florida as well. So anyway, I never would rip on UCs and Cal States because they're awesome, obviously. But like, you can apply to a bunch of them and also a bunch of other schools and just, spread your thoughts broader here. So those hopefully are some encouraging words. Now, I know you're not here for that. You guys are here. I know I have to go to UCLA. What can I do to push my way to the front of the crowd here? Let's talk about what colleges are after. And I've used this before. If any of you guys have ever seen any of my other presentations here, this is a wildly simplified quadrant graph of like sort of what colleges are looking for. Obviously, if you Google the things colleges are looking for, you might get a list of 23 different things. I think they all kind of fit into these 4 categories, but don't, hold my feet to the fire over this. Whether you're looking at schools in California or elsewhere, schools generally are looking for these 4 things. I'm going to mostly talk about 2 of them today. I'm not going to say that much about grades because I think you guys know how that works. Obviously, the higher grades and the more competitive classes you can be taking, the better. And some people disagree with me. I'm not a proponent of like take every AP that there is, even if you have to sleep 2 hours a night and get C's in your other classes. I definitely think you should take a lot of APs if you can. Absolutely in the subjects that you are interested in studying. But if you want to pursue STEM, do you have to take AP underwater basket weaving at 6 a.m. in the morning so that you can't, do your sport? It's not as critical. But obviously, you guys know kind of how this one works. It's pretty straightforward. I'm not going to talk as much about activities either. The only thing I'll say is sometimes people are like, hey, do you have any like super secret, the new things? What are all the crazy people doing to try to edge themselves up a little bit? I've heard a little bit about this independent research project thing that like sometimes juniors will do like summer between their junior and senior year where they'll find something that really interests them. and go and pursue that with connection to somebody. Or I wrote well, it's supposed to be a book, but ended up being like a short novella, like between my junior and senior year. Whatever it is you're fascinated by and, is something you'd want to pursue anyway. Some people will recommend to try to go and do that, but obviously that's getting into, that's for those, 17 schools that are admitting very, very few people. Most schools don't need you to do anything like that. I'm going to talk more today about the things that I am sort of more expert in, the SAT, ACT, as well as the U category, which encompasses lots of things. I'm also going to talk about the essay. Who you are as a person, though, can also come across with your teacher recs. And, if there's an interview, some schools do that. How much they're weighted is sort of a subject of debate. But anyway, it's them getting to know you as a person. So I'm going to start talking about the SAT, ACT. This is something that I've been doing for a long, long time. And if there's one thought that I can get across to you guys here about the SAT, ACT, it's that the more you understand about like how these tests work, the easier this whole process is. So certainly understanding, what types of concepts are on the tests and what types of tricks and wrong answer choices they're going to throw at you, but also just like what's behind the tests in the first place. Like, why do they even have these tests? Like, what's the philosophy behind them? The idea has always been with SAT and ACT is that grades are a great way to measure somebody's college readiness, the best way, most would say. But grades aren't always perfect. You can think of sometimes anecdotes. I'm sure everybody's got that friend who has like a 4.8 GPA but can barely tie their shoes, or they've got that friend who has like a 2.8 but they're brilliant, like they're too busy building robots in their basement. Steve Jobs famously had a 2.8 in high school, but like if Steve Jobs applied to your college, you probably want to admit that guy. Like that's a lot of donation money you're leaving on the table. But how do you know? Like if somebody has a 2.8, how do you know they're Steve Jobs or, somebody who's doing other things in their basement? Well, you could give them a test, a random test that's not exactly like school. It's sort of something different and you can see how they perform on it. Similarly, somebody with a 4.8 GPA who, only gets a 17 or something on their ACT, that might tell you something. Oh, even bribing teachers, leaving suitcases of unmarked bills under desks and whatnot. Now, not everybody values the SAT, ACT the same, especially during the pandemic. Some schools aren't worrying about them as much, but as we get out of this, more and more schools are seeing that, this is a useful thing that can supplement your grades. I'm not saying you shouldn't try to have really awesome grades. Obviously, that's going to be the most useful thing. But for many of the schools out there, this can help as well. And knowing that these aren't supposed to be like school. I mean, a lot of people criticize the SAT, ACT, rightfully so. The tests have lots of flaws. There's all kinds of things wrong with them and whatnot. But the one criticism that I always push back on is when they're like, well, it's not a good test. It's not just like school. That's the point. Like, not supposed to be just like school. They already know how you do in school. They have your grades. And so when you see, let's take a science question from the ACT, a section that terrifies people. And when people see a section like this, they're like, oh my, what the heck is this? What is a facies? I've never heard of this. Is this, oops, excuse me, that's the wrong screen share. Let me try this one. Oh wait, no, I need to do it this way. Oh my gosh, I thought I had my tech all solved, and here I am acting like a goon. Okay, there we go, that's better. So they see this and they freak out. They're like, I never learned about plate tectonic geology in my physical science class. What the heck? The science section on the ACT does not actually test science. It used to not even be called the science section. It's just called the science reasoning section. Still, I believe, officially called that. A lot of people just call it the science, so they caved in like KFC or whatever. But that's the point of this section, is not to actually test you on science. It's to see if you can react and deal with a really terrifying looking graph. So when you see something like this, don't worry about the fact that you've like never heard of facies A and why it's like an alphabet rock or substance or whatever it is. The ACT doesn't test science. They aren't asking questions like, how many electrons are there in a boron atom? Because somebody would be like, oh, I know that. I learned the periodic table yesterday. And someone else would be like, you're a boron. No, they're just seeing if you can look at the axes. We always want to start with the axes on these things. Even if you don't know what a facies is, I think you guys do know what temperature is. Look, it's really hot over here. It's not very hot over here. So like whatever facies F is, that's hot. Whatever facies C is, that's not so hot. Maybe C is for cold, although 200 degrees centigrade is still pretty hot. In any case, hotter over on this side. We've also got these axes here. The more we go down, the more depth increases, as depth tends to do. And then pressure over here also increases. Now, you might know this science. You might be like, oh yeah, one time I went scuba diving and the more I went down under the water, the more pressurized it got. Cool. Don't even need to know that though, because they just told you right in the graph. So then they've got these things called facies. I don't know what those are. I've never heard of them. And frankly, I don't care. Because when they ask me about facies G, I don't have to know what that is. I just have to go find it. So I look here and I see, oh, that's where facies G is. And they want to know about the pressure and the temperature conditions for facies G. Well, facies G likes lots of different temperatures. So that's not very helpful. It's everything from like 200 on up. But when it comes to pressure, how much pressure does facies G want? A lot or not very much? Doesn't it kind of want a lot, like more than 10? So more than 10 pressures. Oh, the answer's J. What's a facies? Who cares? Like, you're not here to understand science. You're here to get a good score. I know that sounds like anti-educational, but like, they're just trying to figure out who's brave enough to like suffer through this or clever enough to realize that's all they're asking. So the more you understand about how these silly tests work, the easier they are. I want to take a step back and talk about logistics on these tests, recommend a plan of attack for you guys. And the first question is one that I do think needs to be asked, especially during the pandemic. Should I test at all? And the answer is maybe. Probably you should at least try it, but not everybody is going to find that an SAT or an ACT score is useful to them. If you aren't applying to anything other than Cal States and UCs, then you shouldn't take the SAT unless there's a scholarship or something that you need, because those schools won't look at them now. If you're applying to any of the other 98.5% of schools in the country, it might be at least worth a practice test to see how you do. Basically, with so many schools being test optional, it's worth it to see if your test score might help you, because so many of these schools will look at your scores. If you send them, you can just simply Google whatever your dream school is. I don't know, let's say you want to go to Pepperdine and gaze longingly out over a, cerulean sea while you don't study at all. You can look up Pepperdine's average GPA or any school's average GPA online and be like, oh, cool, it's a 3.6. I have a 3.9. Awesome. Okay, my chances are reasonably good of getting into Pepperdine with that. Now, assuming you have, decent essays and some extracurriculars and stuff to back that up. You have a 3.4 on the other hand, your chances are not so great of getting into Pepperdine. And then you might look and see what Pepperdine's average like SAT, ACT score is or something like that. And so they're looking at something in the, 650-ish maybe for the both sections. So something in the like 12 to maybe mid-high 1300s. You take a practice test, you get a 1380 on your SAT, that's going to help you at a school like that. If you get, 980 or something, yeah, you can certainly bring that up through some prep, but maybe then with your 3.9 GPA, that wouldn't help you as much. It's at least worth the research once you figure out what kind of schools you are applying to see if this is something that might help you. So I say try it, at least do a practice test, see if one test or the other, maybe you score better on the ACT, I'll talk about that in a second. Maybe that's something that can bolster your grades up. Maybe that's something that can help you. And the best thing about the test optional world we're living in is you can go ahead and take the tests and then see. My niece applied to a bunch of schools on the East Coast last year, and this isn't normal. You shouldn't count on this, but she had like a 1250 SAT score, so pretty good, solid score. She had a very, very high GPA, Many of her schools loved that combination and were throwing scholarship money at her left and right. They're like, wow, she's great in school and she can figure out how to do well on this test. There was one school that had like a 25% acceptance ratio, much more selective. They actually emailed her and said, hey, can you resubmit your application without your test scores? Because your GPA is solid, but your test scores are a little lower than average on this school. She said, okay, she did that. And then they accepted her and gave her a $30,000 a year scholarship offer. So you might not be in the know about whether a school is gonna, want that or not, but the numbers can tell you. Shannon and Ryan and Marion can tell you, like, oh yeah, this SAT score is definitely gonna help you. You know what? Maybe don't submit this one. Use it to help you guys. It can be very helpful in bolstering out your package. Now, in terms of which tests, short answer, again, maybe at least give them both a practice test try, see if one of them goes better than the other. If you're in the long jump in the Olympics and the judges give you a choice between running down the track and jumping once to see if you win a gold medal, or after you've done that, running down a slightly different track with a slightly different jumping board, but still basically the same thing, and then using your better of the two distances, and they give you the choice, what do you want to do? You want to jump once or do you want to jump twice? Why would you not jump twice? Take both leaps, see if your ACT distance is better than your SAT distance. Use the one that is best. Colleges will just accept whichever one you do better on. Now, there are some arguments for focusing on one over the other. If you don't have time to worry about both tests, sure. The best reason, though, is if you know you're going to do a lot better on one test than the other. Best way to do that is just to take a practice test in each and see what your scores are. But there are some differences between the tests that can help you sort of decide. The ACT is known as the fast but simple test. There are more straightforward questions on the ACT. When you get an ACT question out of the middle or beginning of the math section, you might look and be like, this isn't that hard. And then you look at one on the SAT and you're like, head explode. They give you a lot more time on the SAT. In fact, to get a sense of how much more time, look at this. You have to do 61 more questions on the ACT in 5 fewer minutes. Whoa, that is fast. Yeah, time is rough on the ACT. Many people have trouble finishing like any of the sections, certainly not all of them. The ACT's curve at the top end, if you're trying to get like a 34, can be really gnarly too. Like you could just barely miss any questions on the whole test if you want to get a 33 or a really, really, really high score like that. So some people really like that. They're like, no, I don't mind the speed. I don't like the complexity of these SAT questions, because the SAT, while they give you more time, is a trickier test. The questions tend to be, more multi-leveled, layered with traps a little bit more, but they do give you a lot more time to do them. Another factor that sometimes differentiates people is how much they like math. Any of you guys who kind of hate math, you should take the ACT, because the ACT only gives you a quarter of your score based on math. And sure, another quarter is science, but it's not even science, much less math. So don't let that discourage you. If you're stronger at the verbal sections, you're going to be weighted a little higher on the ACT. The SAT, if any of you love math, you should definitely take the SAT. If that's the section that's like really cranking your score up, the SAT gives you half your score based on math, which is still seems sort of weird to me. I mean, I love math, so of course that's fun, but like half the classes you take in college probably aren't going to be math. My younger brother went to MIT and majored in math and didn't even take 50% math colleges. But like I said, the SAT is going for something different. It's not about like calculus level math. It's about testing, clever ways to figure stuff out like that. More on him in a minute. General strategies, guys. First, a really easy one. I hope you all have heard this already, but there's no guessing penalty on the tests anymore. There used to be a guessing penalty on the SAT. That's long gone at this point. Please, please, please always guess on every question. Never leave a question blank on the SAT or ACT. But that doesn't mean you actually need to do them all. In fact, sometimes it's better to just skip a handful of math questions that are just too hard towards the end. By the way, they go easy to hard in the math section. Or if one reading passage is just death, it just melts your brain even to look at, is written in 1850 by some sexist French guy. Like, I can't even look at this. Skip a whole passage and do a better job on the other ones. And then on those blank questions at the end, just bubble abacadabra at the end, just to fill in the rest in a fun design or something. You should concentrate on getting all of the questions you can. For some of you who are going for these elite colleges, that's going to be almost every question on the test. For other people who are like, I'm just trying to get like a 1100 on the SAT, that'll help my grades. You only need to answer like half the questions correctly on the test and then guess on the others, and you'll easily beat that. So start with the easy ones, wherever those are. In the math sections, they're at the beginning. Do, of course, remember to bubble in everything. The SAT and ACT are also extremely repetitive in the content that they test. Here's a random one. They love semicolons. On the grammar section, my God, they just love semicolons, and a lot of people never have used a semicolon other than in emojis. A semicolon, as far as the SAT and ACT are concerned, is a period. It's the same thing as a period. It needs to separate two complete sentences, aka independent clauses, aka, could I just put a period here? Oh yeah, I could, as long as there's a capital letter. All right, then your semicolon is good. Are they really going to test like several questions on the SAT and ACT about semicolons? I promise you will see multiple semicolon questions on these tests. What a weird thing to test. Yeah, there's only 8 concepts that they test on the grammar sections of the SAT and ACT, and they're the same for both tests. So if you learn those, it goes a lot easier. You're definitely going to see triangle questions in the geometry sections of both tests. On the SAT, for sure, their favorite harder math concept to test right now is systems of equations, solving those off each other, sometimes in word problems. They love that one. You're going to see several of those. So if you slept through that week of Algebra 1/Algebra 2, let's get up to speed on that one. Stuff like that. So it's the same few things that they just test over and over and over again. Even just taking a practice test on your own and be like, I didn't know how to do this one. Oh, I forgot the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, let me learn it. Guess what? You're going to see the same test again. That's what standardized means. It has to be the same thing every time. Otherwise, they can't compare your June SAT score to some kid in Kentucky's October SAT score. And of course, there's all kinds of fun tricks that you can learn on these tests. Let me wipe my slate clean here and get a new one. I'm going to show you guys just one of these fun tricks, but it just goes to show that as much as being good at math and good at reading and grammar and stuff is useful on these tests, and don't get me wrong, it is useful. There's also ways to get questions right if you just understand how the test format works that don't even require you to do math or the grammar or whatever. This question here, 15, it uses my favorite math strategy, which is called make up numbers. And every test prep company teaches this, by the way. They call it different things, but really it's pretty simple. I like to call it make up numbers because that's exactly what you're going to do. You're going to just pretend that like x equals 1. In case you saw this and you're like, wait, I forgot how to like change this into these equations. Is this a division of polynomials? Oh my gosh, is this synthetic division? Lord, I forgot this. Fine, let's say you forgot how to do the math. Then just say x is 1. Well, Paul, how do you know that x is 1? How do you know it isn't? Unless it says specifically that it can't be 1, like, oh, x has to be an even number or a negative or something like that. You can pick anything you want. You should pick the easiest thing you possibly can. Then we take that 1. The second step is we plug it in here and we figure out what this thing would be equal to. So let's just plug 1 in here. 1's very easy to plug in, which is why I like it so much. You do 5 minus 2, forgive my chicken scratch handwriting, and on the bottom we get a 4. So that means that this would come out to be 3/4. So let me make sure you guys are all with me here. If we said that x was 1, and we didn't have to, I could have said x was 2 or 19 if I just love pain so much. But I'm going to say x is 1 because it's easy. If x was 1, then the answer comes out to be 3/4. All I have to do now is plug 1 into my answer choices, and whichever one comes out to be 3/4 is my answer. So if I try this first one, there isn't even an x here. I just subtract that and I get 3/3. Is that 3/4? No, that's close, but close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. This next one, I don't think this is going to work either, because look at it. If you just estimate this, it's 5 minus 2/3. 2/3 isn't very much. You could do this in your head, or you could just be like, it's 4 and some change, but that's not 3/4. It's nowhere close to 3/4. So that answer is also eliminated. This third one's going to have the same problem. it's 5 minus some chump change, and that isn't going to do it. 5 minus, in this case, 2/4, so what, 4.5? Oh, and by the way, I didn't really like the first two answers anyway, because like, where did the x go? I don't remember how to do this algebra, but I don't think x just disappears. So anyway, but now I'm confirmed that these are wrong, and C is wrong too, which means that unless I did something wrong, this must be right. So let's look, 17/4. Wasn't 17/4 the same as 4.25? Because 4 goes into 17 4 times with 1 left over. Guess what 5 minus 4.25 is? Ding, 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 ding. Here we go. D is the answer. But that's not the math way my teacher told me to do it. This is not like school. It is different than school. You can do it your math teacher's way. That way is totally thumbs up also. But in case you ever get in a trick, it's nice to be flexible. They're kind of okay with that. They're like, yeah, we want people who are so good at the math that they can do just synthetic division. We're also fine with people who are clever enough to figure out how to do this a different way. And that's also fine. That sort of sometimes unearths those Steve Jobs-like people who don't do things the way the teacher wanted, but they still get to the answer and they still make great college students and employees. So know the tests, guys. I really encourage all of you to try to at least take a practice test. You can use your PSAT from the fall, although you do need to subtract like 100 points off your PSAT score because the curve is way easier on them. If you want proof of that, how hard did you try on your PSAT? Did you like take a bunch of practice tests for it? Oh no, think maybe you'll try harder on your SAT? Oh yeah, gee, I wonder if you'll improve naturally. You got to sort of take that into account a little, but take a practice test. We have some coming up. I'll talk to you about that. But you can also just get one online and take it on your own and then just compare. Okay, so that's what I want to say about SAT, ACT. I want to spend a little bit more time talking about these essays. I'm going to start with some of the stuff I usually talk about in these like full-length essay presentations. I'm going to go a little bit fast through the beginning part because I want to leave some time for a couple new things I want to talk about here with you guys today. But if you want to hear more about these 3 approaches or this curmudgeonly dude right here, we'll have an essay presentation coming up in a little bit, like a full-length one just on essays where we'll go deeper. We're also going to be doing a brainstorming event next Tuesday in the Nest during lunch that I'm going to be there leading to how to come up with ideas for students that's open to students. We'll talk more about that later, but Marion's going to have a sign-up sheet for that, I believe. We'll come back to that. But first, I want to talk about something that's become super important on these college applications these days, the essays. And, you know, it all starts with this guy, well, demographically, it's slightly more likely to be a female and younger than this guy, although I don't know, maybe this guy's 23. He's just had to read 1,500 of your terrible essays this weekend, and that's why he's aged so rapidly. But these people read like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of days, and there's like a million different pieces of advice about what you're supposed to do. Be yourself. No, be somebody else who got into 19 Ivy Leagues. No, be a combination of those two. All of this is true. Like, yes, there are certain things that work better than other things. Yes, you should be yourself. I find that the best way to sort of help people come up with ideas for their essays is sort of to narrow this, the things you can write about, into sort of 3 general approaches. And I'm going to give you guys a quick story example for each one. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about how some of these approaches work better or worse at different schools, hint, hint, the UCs. And then I'll talk to you about a way that I found has really been working for a lot of my students to take kind of mediocre ideas and then crank them up a little bit to a higher level of quality with the kind of a cool trick here I'll talk about. But basically, the concerns of these readers boil down to sort of 3 things. Number one, they do want kids, and this is like the most boring and obvious one of these, but like they do want kids who are going to like come to school and kick butt. Like, we're going to come and just be awesome on campus and obviously do impressive things, not only in their job, but out in the world. If they admit some kid who, you know, starts the next Facebook, they're going to get a lot of donation money later from that kid. And, you know, then they'll finally get that raise that they're after. Now, you can't just write about I'm going to start the next Facebook because like Facebook's not cool anymore. But also somebody already did that. And, you know, it's going to sound lame if you're like, I'm so smart. I mastered programming and I'm going to start Facebook. You can't talk about what you're going to do. You have to talk about what you've already done. So the trick with these types of essays, I call these be impressive essays. Start by thinking of like something that you have done that like maybe most of your friends haven't, or most of the people at your school haven't done. And don't tell me about like what you're going to do in the future with that. You can certainly think about that, but I want you to work backwards and think about like the time that you realized you were good at something, or the time that you got a chance to demonstrate it, or just a time that you did something impressive, and just tell me that story. I'll give an example. I know a lot of the folks in the nest have heard the story before, so forgive me. I do have a couple new stories later. But this was by a kid who I worked with a couple years ago. They were very into creative writing, specifically playwriting and theater. And they went to a high school that had like a really active theater department. They did their big Shakespeare play in the fall, and then in the winter they would do their big musical. And then in the spring they did this thing called the one acts, which were student written plays, where students would submit like a 25, 30-page play. And then the very picky theater director would select the best, like 6 or 7 of them, assign them to student directors, who would then cast, of course, student actors. And then they put on this big hullabaloo at the end of the year. And it was always a wild, good time. And this kid saw this freshman year when they went to go see them. And they're like, oh my gosh, I have to write one of those next year. This is awesome. So over the summer after their freshman year, they taught themselves playwriting. They had no idea how to do it, but went and got a bunch of books and plays and read about the formatting, character development, and blah, 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 and wrote their first ever play, a silly comedy about a kid who gets a time-stopping magical stopwatch that can freeze time and causes all kinds of havoc in the school lunchroom at lunch. Anyway, the play gets selected, and the essay opens with this kid sitting in this dark, hot, nerve-wracking auditorium with all these other people, you know, carefully selected their aisle seat by the door so they can run screaming if this goes embarrassingly badly, when a spotlight illuminates a character that they had invented out of their brain, walks out onto the stage and says their first line, and the audience laughs. And then another character they had invented out of their brain comes out on the stage and says their first line, and the audience laughs. And suddenly in that warm, uncomfortable auditorium, they're hit with this very comfortable, warm feeling of, oh my gosh, I know what I want to do with my life. Nowhere in this essay did they say, I'm going to be a Tony-winning playwright. You better admit me to your school, or I'm going to go someplace else. But you kind of get that idea. You know, they taught themselves playwriting like during the summer. Who does that after their freshman year? They, by the way, and they didn't even say this, but it was suggested, their play as a sophomore was selected presumably over a bunch of seniors and juniors by this very picky theater director that they also planted. But they didn't make a big deal out of that stuff. They just incorporated it into the story. So if you've done something like that, just tell me what happened. Like in a way, if you have an event like this is the easiest essay to write, because you just tell me the story of what happened and you come out of it, if you can do it right, looking impressive. You got to be careful of tone in these essays. Sometimes these can come across as braggy if you don't do it right, but it's a very good way to write, and a very safe style essay. You know, no school is like, I don't know, this kid's writing produced plays in high school. Psh, whatever, everybody does that. If you started a website that raised $10,000 for charity or something, like that's cool. That suggests you're going to do big things in the world, but you don't have to tell me that because you tell me what already happened. Approach number 2, be different. Colleges don't just want butts and chairs. They want all types of students, diversity, and of course the classic kinds of diversity, whatever. But the real reason that diversity is such a great thing is because it allows so many different voices and so many different perspectives on campus. I don't care what color or background you have, like if that doesn't translate into something that you can talk about, you can write a different style of essay. I want to hear about how your particular background or upbringing or whatever makes you different than most of your friends really brought out like who you are, shaped you into the type of person you are. So that's the other trick with these types of essays. You can totally start brainstorming by like, what makes me different? Oh, I'm from this country, or I have this religion, or I only have one arm, or whatever it is. I'm a one-legged albino lumberjack from Wyoming. The statistics are on your side. There are not very many of those. But why does being a one-legged albino lumberjack from Wyoming make you a better college student? I need to hear a little bit about that, along with, okay, yes, I can see that you're very diverse. By the way, if the school just desperately needs more lumberjacks, then check, you're already in. Doesn't matter what you write in your essay, but you have to assume that maybe there's a couple of others and you got to beat them out. How can you write your essay about that? By finding out what perspective that gave you in your life. So I had an essay here by a twin who, of course, was like, I'm a twin. Only 3% of the population are twins. I should totally write about that because like not that many people, it makes me different. That's true. But you're not the only twin applying. And again, why does being a twin make you a better college student? This girl was trying to get into UCSB, and God bless Google, I don't remember how we found this, but somehow we determined that there had been like 89 twins. I don't know how we found this online, but 89 twins who had applied the previous year to UCSB, and they'd admitted like 25 of them. Well, you know, they all wrote about being a twin. So how do you write about being a twin that's good versus not good? Well, as we've been saying, this girl found the story that sort of like helped shape her personality. She found an insight on this. Her particular twin story was that her and her sister were like identicals, looked the same, wore the same clothes obnoxiously, went to the same little tiny school, I think it was up in PV or something, and were basically two versions of the same person until they hit puberty. And then, and apparently this happens with twins sometimes, is they sort of began to diverge. One of them got a little taller, one of them's hair changed color, one became more athletically inclined, the other became more academically inclined. One of them's eyes even changed color, which sounds like a very X-Men thing to happen, but apparently it does happen sometimes with twins. Anyway, when they go to this giant high school suddenly, they're looking at their schedules on the first day and they realize they don't have a single class together. And as her sister is walking away across the quad from her for like the first time in her life, she opens her essay with like, everyone always wonders what it would be like to be a twin. I always wondered what it would be like not to be one. And on the first day of freshman year, I found out. She wrote her essay about individuality, about how nobody understands individuality as well as she does because for 15 years, she wasn't one. She's just a carbon copy of somebody else. So start with your like background thing, but then see what's different about your thing than everybody else. Are you in marching band and you play the tuba? Cool. But imagine your essay is in a pile of other tuba players. What makes your story a little different than theirs? That can be another way to get a start on your essay. The third approach, this is the crazy one, the viral one, the girl who wrote her essay on a Papa John's pizza lid and Sharpie and nailed that in and got into all the Ivy Leagues. Or my favorite one, this was from way back in the day when you still weren't submitting these via computer, but this one girl wrote her essay in backwards handwriting and you had to read it using a mirror. And it was like this crazy gimmick and she got into a bunch of schools, but then everyone was like, I'm going to try that. They would try similar gimmicks and then not find success. This other approach is about just being interesting. They have to read a ton of these. So like, what's the craziest thing you can write about? I do want to caveat this though, by saying that you do have to remember that this still needs to be you. This still needs to be your style. Be funny, touching, dramatic, whatever fits your topic, but use a gimmick. Don't use a gimmick that isn't you. I'll give an example of a funny essay in a minute. And sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, that essay was so funny. Should I write a funny essay, Paul? And I'm like, well, it depends. Are you funny? Because if you're not, oh, for the love of God, please do not. Oh, try to write a funny essay. So painful for everybody. The thing you got to remember is like this girl who wrote this backwards handwriting essay. You know what she wrote her essay about? Overcoming her struggle with dyslexia. Oh, okay. I can't write that one. That's her essay. You have to find the right, angle on this from you. But if you do have a touching story, you do have a dramatic story, you have a funny story that fits who you are, there is something to be said for like, wow, I haven't seen an essay like this before. This certainly works at, liberal arts schools. We'll talk a little bit about this in a second. And this is a little bit less loved by the UCs, but we'll get there. There's an example that I always give. This kid wrote about the basement in his house. So apparently this kid's story, he was like the oldest of three brothers, and they were all like big, kind of athletic. I think the two younger brothers both played football or rugby in college or something like that. And this older brother, so the story goes that these three boys they were so rowdy. They would fight, they would break everything. And when their parents moved to a new house, they were like, all right, listen, you animals, apparently we can't keep you goons from breaking everything. So here's the new rule with the new house. You get the basement. You can just have it. Like, we're never going to go down there. Not going to put anything down there. That's just your room. But if we ever catch you in any other part of the house fighting, we're going to lock you in the trunk of the car for the weekend. Well, this basement very quickly became like Lord of the Flies gladiator arena, like Hunger Games, Treasure Island from Pinocchio. It was madness down there. And the oldest brother, his job was to invent these thinly veiled creative games that were just kind of excuses to beat the heck out of his younger brothers. And like Marshall from How I Met Your Mother, if you guys know that show. But they would come up with these insane games. They'd invite all the neighborhood kids to come over, and they had a game where like they would just block up all the windows with pillows so that it was pitch dark in the room. And then everyone would just run through the room swinging hockey sticks. And, you know, when it hit somebody, it made a different sound than when it hit a wall. So everybody else knew where to throw their hockey sticks like javelins. They had one game where the youngest brother's name was Joseph. And the only rule of the game was hit Joseph with pillows until he falls down. That was the name of the game, hit Joseph with pillows until he falls down. And Joseph didn't particularly like this game, but everybody else thought it was a blast. Anyway, you're reading this essay and you're like, what is going on? Who is this kid? But I kind of want to hang out with him. And if you write an essay that just makes them laugh or is weird or crazy, that could be another way that they remember you, especially if it shares something about the student was interested in like creative marketing and stuff like that, and selling these games to all the neighborhood kids was sort of part of that. So that's a third approach, like be as interesting as you can. Now, any of those approaches can be good. I want to say a quick word about like different essay styles at different colleges. So in my essay class and with my essay tutoring students, I usually have them work on their 4 UCs first. And then like once one of them seems maybe stronger, or you can unite 2 of them, that becomes like their longer Common App. But you do want to remember that there can be a slightly different style to these different essays. The Common App schools, and it depends on the Common App school, but they tend to be more open to like whatever. Like if you want to write a crazy essay because that's you, cool. If you want to write a really impressive essay because that's you, cool. The UCs tend to like slightly more, and I gotta be careful with the way I use this word, but straightforward essays. Straightforward implies like boring and lacking originality, and I don't like that, because you definitely should still be creative and interesting in these essays. But, you know, I had a kid, I'll give you a weird example in a second, but I had a kid write about like touring every 7-Eleven in South Bay to find the best flavor of slushie. And he just didn't have a lot of his essays were like that. And he just didn't have a lot of luck with that style of essay at the UCs. He got into a bunch of like, you know, liberal arts schools, but sometimes they want more of like the impressive essay. They like the different one too, especially if you can tie it into like what you're going to actually do and study. But do keep that in mind. Sometimes that affects, you know, the style of essay I would recommend. I read an essay a couple years ago. We'll call it the ninja essay. That was basically a short story. It was about, so this kid wrote about a ninja who was sneaking into an admissions office to steal back a badly written cliche essay and replace it with a better essay. And at the end, it turns out that the new essay he brought is gone. And so he has to make the other essay up on the spot. And it's this essay. And there's like the stamp of the ninja at the bottom of it. But it literally was just like a short story. It's like the black figure melted into the shadows as the janitor shuffled past. He considered the poison-tipped shuriken in his belt, but decided against it. If discovered, he could always just say he was a drama student. And it was just like this silly thing. And this person had some success with it, got some really weird scholarships. I don't think I've ever seen another essay like it, but I don't think I would submit that to the UC. It's like, that's not what they're into. Shannon's shaking her head. She knows it's too out there for them. It's too wild. Like, you know, a liberal arts small school on the East Coast maybe would like be into that kind of thing. But think about the school that you're looking for. I had another student that I worked with last fall who said I could mention his essay, although I won't give too many specifics. He was the president of his mock trial, and he wrote about using the Socratic method to help the rest of the people in the group like learn more about debating. A lot of fancy words. Not my favorite essay I've ever read, but it was a good, solid, tight, like short UC essay. And as we'll mention in a minute, he had some success. full disclosure, I'm pretty sure that I personally would never get into UCLA or most of the other very selective UCs right now. My style was more of the crazy essay style, like that ninja one. I was very, very good at standardized tests. I got a nice scholarship offer from USC, decided to go to Northwestern instead. But the UCs aren't looking at test scores right now. And my GPA was fine, but like they didn't do weighted GPAs at my school. So all the AP classes I took and got A minuses in just kind of knocked me down a little bit. I wasn't even in the top 10% of my class. That's not the style that those are into. So, other schools, I didn't apply to any UCs, but probably was a good thing. This mock trial student, he had a great GPA. He also got into USC, and every UC he applied to, got into Berkeley, got into UCSB. He's now in the running for a Regents scholarship at UCLA, which I frankly think he'll get. He got rejected from Northwestern. I don't know. They just weren't into that kind of thing. Am I saying that UCLA wants like straightforward, related to your major, impressive essays, and Northwestern wants crazy essays? No, not necessarily. You can definitely go too crazy, even at a small liberal arts school. You can definitely go too straightforward, AKA boring and cliche with your UC essays. And you should still try to find those interesting. But my point is, like, different colleges want different sorts of things. My brother, the one who went to MIT, wrote his essay about being captain of the football team and captain of the math team, and how football was like math. Apparently they liked that. Oh, we like math and we need more jocks. My other brother went to Brown. I don't remember what he wrote his essay about. He was being recruited for football, so maybe that didn't matter as much. By the way, the easiest way to get into school is get recruited to play sports there. But the point is, like, different colleges want different sorts of essays. You can maybe get a sense of this on their website. A lot of schools will post their like favorite essays from the previous year or example essays. They're not going to say directly, oh, we like impressive style essays or we like different style essays, but you can kind of read the ones that they have and sort of get a sense. Don't get intimidated because it's like the top 1% of essays up there, but you can sort of get a little bit of their info. With slightly more straightforward essays, no tests, heavy GPAs. I think the summary here is that like the UCs are going for a particular kind of thing right now. I think that's great. I think it's better in some ways. The more different kinds of approaches that colleges have, the more different kinds of students that get served, which is awesome. But with any system, like certain types of students are going to have a higher chance in system X. Certain other types of students are going to have a lower chance in system X. Consider opening your aim to a wider band of schools. Like there really is some super good college out there that maybe you think you don't have the GPA or the test scores for, but they're looking for students just like you. If you have a 4.8 GPA and are president of mock trial, but don't love standardized tests, like there's never been a good time to apply to UCLA. Never been a better time than this. But like if you got a B once, despite your 1500 SAT score, go Trojans. Last thing I want to say, and we're running out of time here at the end, so I just will talk briefly about this. But this trick I was talking to you guys about like ways to take essays that you're not that stoked about and make them better. I call this the combo essay. As I'll talk in that presentation that we're doing at lunch next week and in my future ones, when you start writing down all your ideas, you might find that a lot of them are like halfway there. Like, oh, I really like swimming and I coached swimming. Okay, all right, maybe. Oh, and I also am interested in medicine. Okay, like what about that? Oh, I wrestle, but like I also have this condition where like my feet break very easily. Huh, interesting, and you're a wrestler. Or I'm in the drums, and my dad also had this heart condition and stuff. Sometimes you can find a pairing of two of your like mediocre essay ideas that together have like a really cool thematic resonance. I had this girl, the one who was into swimming. She had done a lot of medical stuff too, like volunteered at a hospital and done a lot of with her biology AP classes and whatnot. But she also was a swim instructor, and she wrote her essay about how like when she was younger, she just loved swimming in a pool because it was all about just like the mechanical, systematic, predictable cutting through the water, turning around, going back and forth. And she got interested in science because it was the same way, like it's predictable. You could treat a disease in a certain way and it would always respond the same. But then when she coached swimming at the ocean, in the waves. And suddenly her students were just getting pounded and churned and flipped over. She was like, whoa, this is a very different type of thing. But she gradually realized she kind of liked the unpredictability of that. In the same way, when she volunteered at this hospital, getting thrown into like an emergency room system, science is predictable. There are rules that need to be followed, but there's also chaos. And she sort of learned that she liked both elements of medicine. And by talking about that and sort of tying them together, it took two sort of medium essays and like made it much more interesting. It was a very impressive essay as well, because you could see this girl really understands what medicine is really like. This wrestler who had breakable feet, same kind of deal. They actually were also interested in medicine, and their bone condition led to them getting deeper into that. But it showed like a thoughtfulness, while kind of shedding more than one light on them at the same time. My favorite example of this was a student I had a couple years ago who I was really not super stoked about all his ideas, and neither was he. He was like, well, my dad had this heart condition, and it was really serious. And he had to have like emergency surgery. And I was like, oh, that seems interesting. What happened? And they're like, oh, the surgery was good. It was a success. He's fine. It's like, okay, maybe that's interesting. What else? He's like, well, I was in the drum corps of my marching band, and we made it to the regional tournament and we won. And I was like, okay, that's sort of impressive. Did you like lead the band? He's like, no, I was just one of the drummers. Okay. Well, turns out that these two events actually happened right at the same time. In fact, his dad's surgery was scheduled for like the same day or two that this drum tournament was in. And he actually went to his dad and was like, Dad, should I just skip my drum tournament? I want to be here with you during this surgery. And his dad said, no, man, like you've worked so hard for this. I'll be fine. There's nothing you can do to help me here. Go and drum. And so, you know, he had set this all up at the beginning of his essay, talking about like, my dad always taught me that success comes from two things, hard work and good luck. And I learned about the hard work thing when I didn't work hard and I got cut from the band, and I tried really hard over the summer and I made it the next year. I learned about good luck when my dad had a random doctor visit where they discovered this heart anomaly, and they said, wow, we got to get you into surgery. Anyway, flash forward to this moment when he's in this band competition and he's drumming and he's doing his best, but all he can think about is his dad, like off there, you know, getting the surgery. And he's like trying to drum his dad's beating heart, like back to life again. And things end up well. They end up winning the band tournament. They end up, his dad's surgery goes well. And he's like, turns out like my dad was right. It does take both things. And I just thought it was such an interesting way to combine two ideas that were very mediocre into an essay that suddenly wasn't. So if you're getting discouraged when your first 12 ideas all kind of seem like what everyone else would write, that can be another way to group them together into something different. Okay, so where to go from here? I want to leave a minute or two for Q&A. I see some are coming in the chat, but I just want to tell you guys real quick about some things you can do next. Obviously, concentrate on your finals and whatnot while they're coming up. SAT, ACTs, this is a good time to take them. You know, June is a strong upcoming date. I'll talk about that in a second. Once the summer begins, that's when you might really turn your attention to essay brainstorming, but you can get a start now. On the 5th of April, coming up next Tuesday, I'll be at the Nest at lunch. And I think they're going to put into the chat the detail for signing up. It's probably already in there. I just haven't looked. Also, if you guys are looking to do a free SAT, ACT practice test, PJ Test Prep, we have one coming up on April 10th. You don't have to do it with us. Like there's a million different people doing free practice tests. Ours is going to be a proctored Zoom one, or you can just take one on your own, but like we'll grade it for you. So if you're not doing anything at the tail end of spring break, or maybe the front end of you guys' spring break, that would be a day. We have a couple of other over the summer. That's here on the handout as well. I'm going to do a longer full-length essay thing in addition to the thing. These are here. And then there's other stuff about what we do, our classes, our tutoring options and things like that. I'm not going to bore you guys with all that sales pitchy detail stuff here, but we do have classes coming up. Like for the June SAT class, we have in-person one in Hermosa Beach and a Zoom one that I'll be instructing myself. When I started this company, I really wanted to make sure like teaching quality was as high as it could be. So if I ever let anybody else teach my class, which I usually don't, they have to be with me for several years and prove themselves, but I'm teaching this one. If any of you guys are taking that June test, There's other classes over here over the summer. Over the summer, we also do a full-length essay program that I teach, where we bang out all 4 of your UC app essays as well as your Common App essay. Get that done before you go back to school in the fall, and they're just done, good and polished and everything. It's a combination of like Zoom meetings like this, in-person meetings where we'll be in Hermosa, and one-on-one Zoom meetings, because obviously you got to meet with everybody one-on-one with their notes and stuff, and plenty of feedback. So this is all in the packet as well. We'll send this out, but it'll also be available on our website, pjtestprep.com. I can see that we are 4 minutes over, so I want to turn this over to questions and see what I didn't cover. Ryan, Shannon, how should I do this? Should I read the chat or should I take them from you guys?
Oh, you go ahead and read the chat, Paul, and just so everybody knows, both of those documents are in the chat. So the link is in the chat box.
Oh,
so
even easier.
Everything's there. Everything is there, but go ahead, Paul, read out.
Okay, perfect. Did I mention this doesn't apply to juniors? This was from a long time ago. Most of this stuff is geared towards juniors, but if anybody also has younger students, most of the stuff is the same from year to year. The one thing that is different is there will be a new format of the SAT, not the ACT, at least as far as I have heard. Shannon, you haven't heard anything about the ACT changing, have you? Okay, I look periodically and I haven't seen anything, but the SAT will be changing starting not this coming fall, but the next fall for those juniors, and then the spring after that. So nothing you guys need to worry about. What to do if there are no activities that the student currently participates in? Join one. It's not too late, guys. Especially the activities and the test scores are the two, and your essays, I suppose, can all be modified substantially. These don't need to be like formal activities too. You don't have to, join Glee Club or something. You can teach yourself Japanese at home, with Babelfish or, whatever those apps are. You can teach yourself something. You can start a group with your friends, something like that. They're just looking for initiative. People who are going out and like not being content with just going home and doing their homework and that's it, participating in their church or their school or their family life. Or if you have a part-time job, by the way, that is a great thing too. I read a wonderful essay about a kid who worked at In-N-Out Burger and was very interested in business and like studied business from the inside out by the way the fries were made and where they sourced their potatoes from and stuff like that. I was like, what a cool way to capture that. Somebody had said we can't see, but you guys could see this, right? The screen sharing was okay? Okay, I think most people have. Class options for the May date on our website. Right here at the top is our class schedule. We may have taken down the May SAT one. No, it's here. It just started already. So if you're looking for the May one, I maybe didn't include that on the handout just because it already started. You can join a class late and then make the classes up with videos. We always record everything as we are recording this. So you can always mix and match. Some students also will like start up with class, 3 or 4, and then they'll backtrack and do the other classes with the June one. Scheduling gets a little weird, but you can always figure it out if you haven't started yet. When I say Common App school, someone asked about that. I just mean any school that accepts the Common Application, which is a lot of them. UCs have their own application. You have to do the UCs separate, but many schools have now banded together to accept what's called the Common App. There's also a cousin called the Coalition. Basically, the idea is so you don't have to fill out 97 different apps. You just fill out one and then submit it to each of these schools. Beware, some schools also want supplemental essays. When you write your UC essays first, though, the 4 short ones, you often find that one or more of those short essays can be repurposed as a supplemental essay after you've written your regular Common App essay. Somebody said, OMG, Northwestern is where I want to go. It's a great school. Had a great time. The football team is up and down, but you can still pretend like you're a real Big Ten football team. But I loved it there. Will the recording be available? Yes, it will. We'll post this on the line. It has to process on Zoom's giant server in a cave in Elon Musk's basement for a while first. So it won't be available immediately, but probably by the end of the night, we'll have it up. I'll send that to everybody over at Redondo, and I'll also post it again at our website, pjtestprep.com. Shannon, Ryan, Marion, is there anything else you wanted me to cover that I forgot? How many essays on the UC? 4, and CSUs generally don't have essays unless there's a specialty program that you're applying to. So don't worry about that for the Cal States. Okay, I tend to be very thorough, which is why it's already 7:09.
There we go. Paul.
Yeah.
Back. I couldn't unmute myself, so I was.
I noticed you were trying to talk.
Making sense. So to answer the question, no, there is no indication that the ACT is going to change this year. Yeah, okay. Also, there's no indication yet. Anyway, I don't see it coming that the UC prompts, the personal insight question prompts, are going to change. Yay. And neither are the common application essay prompts. So everything looks pretty much steady Eddie. And so that's good, right? So we're just kind of continuing. Yes. And then I missed that last question. What was the last question, Paul?
Oh, I think I answered all of them, but one more just came in. How come school counselor says California college costs when you say it's only $13K? If you're out of state, California colleges cost $40K, but you are not out of state. If you're going to another school's out of state, they might be talking about private colleges. Colleges can range anywhere from basically free to like 60 grand a year. Just Google your college that you're looking at and see what its price is. Like, that's the easiest way.
Ryan, go ahead and type in the collegedata.com. We also use just a free resource online called collegedata.com. And generally they'll break down the tuition versus the, housing, that kind of thing. So, but generally speaking, the UCs, everybody are just the cost of attendance overall is anywhere between $36,000 and $40,000 a year. So that's kind of the, we always figure we can talk about tuition, but your kids got to eat, they got to live somewhere. So the total cost, that price tag is somewhere around anywhere between 36 and 34. So hopefully that helped. Well, that was super, super helpful. And like you said, we'll reiterate that those stories, as we call them, your essays, are going to be very important now that test scores can be optional. Although we also agree with you, Paul, we always do, that they are an advantage. When we can score well, they are an advantage. So Mr. Jury is just an outstanding resource. And so we encourage you to, if needed, to reach out to his website there, Paul, and you'll put the video on that website as well, right? On your website?
Yeah, I'll paste it right here at the top, if not by the end of the night, like probably by midday tomorrow. Okay. And yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm always happy to be a resource. These tips are just the tip of the iceberg. If you feel like you want to join any of our classes, I'm happy to work with you guys. This has been awesome.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thanks everybody for coming tonight. And Paul, you always do great work. We appreciate you very much.
You guys are the best. Okay. I'll see many of you in person in the nest next Tuesday.
Okay, we'll see you then.
Thank you guys.
Bye, everybody.
All right, I'm going to end this recording and stop this sharing.